Hey guys, MANIC.MERCURIAN here. So in this video I wanted to do something a little bit less structured, and I'm on planetwatcher.com, and I figured it'd be fun to just go through and see what is in store for us in the astrology for the upcoming months, maybe for the rest of the year. I've been making these pretty much weekly videos, and so I've been updating myself on the astrology for each week, but then I realized it's making me very nearsighted because at any given time I only know what's going on in astrology for maybe up to like 2 weeks. So I just want to take this opportunity to go forward and to see with you what we can see for the near or maybe even far future. So this is the chart for today when I'm currently filming this. It's April 19th. You can see it's the last day of Aries. Do you see my mouse? I think you do. I think you do. But you can see the sun is at 29 degrees Aries, and so it's the last day of Aries. Mercury has already entered Taurus. I believe the sun will actually enter Taurus today as well. I covered this in my astrological update video. But yeah, so it's actually, I guess, the last day of Aries, but also the first day of Taurus today. But I'm looking for not so much the little planetary aspects and ingresses. I'm looking for the big stuff, kind of, because like I said, I want to cover a larger expanse of time in this video. And so for the near future, the main thing I see is just this clustering of planets. Pretty much ever since Aquarius season back in February, Mercury, Mercury and Venus have been kind of close to the sun. They're always within, well, Venus is always within 2 signs from the sun, and Mercury is always within 30 degrees or 1 sign from the sun. But yeah, they're very close right now. I mean, they're almost conjunct right now. So as they've gone through the end of Pisces and Aries and Taurus, that cluster is going through these different signs. And so when you combine it with Chiron. Oh, sorry, my cat just knocked over my water. He likes to climb on my desk where there's very little room to be climbing and moving around. But what I was saying is, so ever since like the end of Pisces, I guess these planets have been clustered. They were all together in Aquarius as well, but especially going through end of Pisces, Aries, Taurus, these planets have been clustered, Sun, Mercury, and Venus, and so when they're in Aries, they added to Chiron in Aries, so 4 planets stellium, 5 when the moon was there. Same thing in Taurus. That's now we're entering a big cluster in Taurus. So the focus has been very much on the seasons, I guess. So like the normal focus that right now we are going from the early third of spring to the middle third or middle sector of spring. That's very normal, but I think it's more significant this year just because of those planets clustering close to the sun. And yeah, so it just makes a stronger focus on whatever sign the sun is in, just because the sun isn't alone, it's with these clusters, this cluster of planets. So that's the main thing happening right now, and that will continue through Taurus season and Gemini season. So let's go forward. You'll have to bear with me through all these clicking sounds, but here you can see, I mean, this is interesting, and again, I covered all this in the my most recent astrological update video. But here you can see, I mean, the sun, Uranus, Mercury, and Venus are all clustered so close together in Taurus. So there's a huge focus on Taurus right now that we're going into, which is very interesting. And I've been thinking a lot about Taurus and almost getting some intuitive messages about it, because normally what I say about Taurus, and this is correct, is that it's a very conventional sign. It's conservative, it's prudent, it's relatively easy to understand. I would say it's probably the easiest of all the 12 signs to understand, because it's simple, it's straightforward, it's practical, it makes sense, it's based on what you can perceive with your 5 senses, and so it's easy for us to understand. What you see with Taurus is what you get. However, I mean, I suppose with any sign, if you delve into it, there's always some complexity there. A sign, any kind of archetype, I guess, if we want to get kind of general, is there's got to be some nuance and some complexities there if you zoom in far enough. And I think the same is true for Taurus. For example, okay, so let's bring up Hitler's chart. Hitler asked her theme. You can see I've pulled this up before. And I actually covered this in my narcissist empath astrology video. I don't remember the exact title, but something along those lines. Okay, but there's a different side to Taurus other than being just, practical and easygoing and stubborn. That's a gracious personality. It's ruled by Venus. It's easy to understand, but also easy to work with. However, there's a different side to it. So, Hitler, I think we all know who that is. He was a Taurus, sun at 0 degrees Taurus. Usually, some people would consider that a cusp, but at the same time, whenever you have any planet, including the sun, at 0 degrees of a sign, you get a very strong burst of that sign's energy. So having sun at 0 degrees Taurus, this is going to be a very Taurus-y person, if that makes sense. Someone who very much fits the bill of Taurus. But he doesn't just have sun there. He has Venus and Mars there as well. He does have Mercury in Aries, so he will come off a little fiery and be extra confident in his thinking and be, more spontaneous in his communications and thinking patterns than perhaps the average Taurus would be. But at the same time, he does have Venus and Mars there, and I've noticed that wherever someone's Venus and Mars are, they will sort of have the appearance of that sign. And so especially having Sun, Venus, and Mars all in Taurus, this person's probably going to look like a Taurus, probably going to act like a Taurus. Again, Mercury is in Aries, so he's going to be a little bit fiery in his speech, which, makes a lot of sense for Hitler. But the other thing is, he's a Libra rising. And Libra rising is ruled by Venus. Libra is ruled by Venus, so that makes Venus his chart ruler, and Venus is in domicile in Taurus. So this seems like a very Taurus-dominated person. Again, it is really important to note that Mercury is in a different sign than the Sun in this example. It's not in Taurus. But still, there's so much, there's those 3 personal planets in Taurus, plus he's a Libra rising, which strengthens the Venusian pattern. And he's got Moon in Capricorn, which is earthy like Taurus. So you'd think this would be a very Taurus-y person, very stable, easygoing, gracious. You would think that he's super Venus-y. So that means Venus is all about like love and light, right? It's like super beautiful. It's all about aesthetics. I don't want to talk about Hitler too much, but like he was into art before his political endeavors, right? But my point here is that Venus, there's another side to Venus. Venus was also called Lucifer, depending on whether it was a morning star or evening star. In other words, depending on which side of the sun it appeared to be on. So was it ahead of the sun and therefore rose in the morning before the sun? Or was it behind the sun, therefore set after it? Do you know what I mean? So you're either seeing Venus in the morning or in the evening, depending on where it's positioned relative to the sun from our perception. And ancient people would distinguish these 2 sides of Venus. They would call them by different names. The morning star, aka Venus, was also called Lucifer. And that version of Venus in many cultures was called the warrior goddess. Okay. And I think, and there's an interplay between Venus and Mars as well. There's a lot of overlap, I think. Venus is the feminine energy to some extent, to a great extent, I would say. It is about being gracious and pleasant, and I think these are very feminine qualities in a way. Being sweet and loving and charismatic and having a pleasant laughter or song or what have you. But at the same time, there's another, if we just think about femininity for a second, they have the saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, or something like that. Women can be very fiery, and I've noticed this in animals as well. Like usually with dogs, I can tell if they're female or male just because the females will be more aggressive and they'll be more active in general, and the guys will usually be more easygoing. And I think the same is true for humans as well. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but like, women can be sweet and pleasant, and all these Venus archetypes that we like to attribute to Venus. But women can also be cunning, and I think sometimes men can be maybe more immediate, maybe more simple to some extent. Women, and you can see this in the Taurus, in the in the Venus ruled signs, especially Libra, but also Taurus, where yeah, of course they are pleasant, they are easy to work with, but they can be very strategic as well. They can use their they can use their charisma, or use their they can purposely appear easygoing and gracious and polite, and like Libra is all about friendships and partnerships, but it's also about open enemies. So Libra might, if Libra was so inclined, it could very much act like your friend in order to gain information or manipulate, that sort of thing. Venus rules covert warfare, I guess. So if we go back to the warfare attribute of Venus, Mars was the warrior god, but Mars would be like very direct offensive warfare. Venus would be secretive warfare, so like spying, or I don't know, manipulating like currency or something sort of covert, I guess you could say. Any kind of covert means of attaining whatever it is that you desire, because again, Venus and Mars, that's what they're all about, is desire, and about getting what they want. They just get what they just desire very different things, and they go about getting what they desire in very different ways. Mars is very direct. It just goes and gets it. It's the hunter, it's the warrior. It's just like, there's that thing that I want, I'm just gonna go get it. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's like brute force. It's like a big sledgehammer. Venus is more cunning. It's like a feather or something, or I don't know, what kind of weapon would Venus be. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying though? And I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but this all pertains to Taurus, and I think it's relevant because we have all these planets in Taurus now. And I've just been thinking about these things recently, like why did all the Germans listen to Hitler? Why did they? He was a great leader before the World War II stuff, before the genocide stuff, which is obviously, I don't even need to say how obviously terrible that is. But before that, he like fixed the economy. It was a miracle. They called it Hitler's miracle. And this is just one individual, that I'm talking about. But I just think it's relevant with, I just think his chart looks a little bit like this current chart, just with that big focus in Taurus, and on Venus in general. So I couldn't help but think about Hitler lately, I guess, in relation to this current time that we're entering. So I guess this is a very long-winded way of saying, I think for the relatively short time period that we're entering, the month or so long season of Taurus that we are just entering, yes, it can be pleasant. Spring can be very beautiful. I've been in different locations in the United States, and most of the country is relatively temperate, where there's some sort of seasons, and I think the middle of spring is very beautiful. Same with the beginning of fall. These are both the time periods which correspond to the signs that are ruled by Venus. One is a stage of growth, and one is a stage of the beginning of decay, but both can be very beautiful. Middle of spring, everything is blossoming, and there's flowers at that time. There's young animals, there's birds chirping, all this type of stuff. It's very beautiful, it's very aesthetic. So think about that. It's not just that. That's one representation of the energy you're experiencing at this time. It also applies to everything. So wealth might become of a greater abundance at this time. Of course, it depends on your chart. Taurus might be a very difficult energy for you to work with. It might be an easy energy for you to work with. It just depends on your specific chart. But for everyone in general, this is a time of abundance. Aries was a little rough, but also extremely inspiring and exciting, where everything is beginning. You're birthed into the world, which is scary, but also so invigorating and just amazing. And there's just so much new stuff happening. It's overwhelming. Taurus gets a little more stable. We're in it now. We're going. We're building. Do you know what I mean? So that's very positive, but at the same time, I do think there is maybe some potential for deception or like or covert means, or I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. I've just been getting intuitive messages about that lately. I do think I haven't quite figured that out enough yet. I think there's more to that. But anyway, so that was a long rant. Let's go forward though. So these planets, like I said, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus are all very close together. So they'll stay close together as they enter Gemini. So going into early May, we have first Mercury entering Gemini, then Venus, and then later the Sun. And maybe more importantly at this time around, mid-May, looks like May 15th, Jupiter enters Pisces. And I just, like I said, I've been so nearsighted. That was really surprising, I guess, to me when I first saw that. I had reviewed the astrology for this year several months ago, but it's been a while. It's so crazy to me that Jupiter usually enters a sign once every 12 and a half months or so. And so for it to be entering Pisces already, that just seems so crazy to me. I mean, it only entered Aquarius last December, and now it's already entering Pisces. But that is exciting for a couple of reasons. I mean, Jupiter's in domicile in Pisces, and Jupiter is a benefic, and so having this, Jupiter, which rules abundance and good fortune and expansion, having that in Pisces where it's in domicile, that just seems exciting to me. But at this time, we also have a water influence suddenly happening where, especially on the day. Okay, well, so technically Jupiter enters Pisces May 13th. But then only a couple days later, Moon enters Cancer, where it will join Mars. And then there's also Neptune is in Pisces, of course. So that's 4 planets in water signs. And this is the biggest water influence I've seen in a long time, probably since 2017. I mean, back when Saturn was in Scorpio, but that was quite some time ago. So we just haven't experienced such a strong burst of water energy. And that's one which is very challenging to work with, I think. I remember back in I want to say 2013, 2014, there were so many water planets. Here, let's check that out. This video is so it's gonna be so rambling, but that's okay. So let's go back to, I don't remember exactly, I haven't seen this in a while. Okay, well, right there's a water influence: Chiron, Neptune, North Node, and Saturn. But let's go forward a year, because then Jupiter will be. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So yeah, I do remember it was very watery back at this time, especially if you would go back to, let's go back to like Pisces season, for example. Oops. I mean, okay, so pretty much whenever you have the outer planets in one element, so we've got Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter all in water signs in Pisces, Scorpio, and Cancer respectively. And so during this year in 2014, whenever the Sun and Mercury and Venus would enter a water sign, boom, suddenly you'd have a lot of planets, like half the planets in water, just because you've got that outer planet long-term setup in water. So when the short-term setup represented by the inner planets also aligns with water, you got lots of water. And I just remember at that time in general, it was very hard. It was, everyone I knew was kind of going through stuff. Everyone was kind of depressed. I mean, we've been going through stuff in 2020 with COVID as well, but you'd be surprised how many people I've talked to who said 2020 was actually good for them. Like, it's been very dynamic, where I think, so many people going home, I think that was really destructive and depressing for a lot of people. And there's so much change, which is always hard to handle. But for other people, I think it was positive as well. And for a lot of people, it might have been both. Maybe you went home, which sucks because you're not working, but then you could spend more time with family. Or maybe you were alone and you were just home alone, and so you were depressed and just completely alone. There's so much change there, and I think it has been a hard time, but it's been mixed. But back in 2014, it just seemed very dark to me. In my world, everyone I knew, it just seemed like a difficult time. But at the same time, I sometimes look back at that time and reminisce, because it was exciting. There were just, I don't know, there were just things that happened in my life, and I've talked to other people who relate to this as well, that it did seem more intense, more challenging, but it seemed exciting. Like there was just more crazy stuff happening, I guess, which is not always good. Obviously, it was very unstable, but at the same time, there were really important, life changing events, really positive times as well, interspersed in these dark times, if that makes sense. And to me, that's very indicative of the water influence. And so the reason why I'm talking about all that is because, excuse me, is because that's the sort of thing I would expect with that new water influence. I think water is the most challenging element for us to deal with, just because it does represent change, and it represents a lot of the more non-physical aspects of life, which I think we as humans have a hard time understanding. And we have a hard time accepting change and endings. Endings also pertain to the water element. Yeah, so I think water is the hardest for us to deal with, especially also because we're accustomed to the yang energy, or the yang polarity in Western society. Like the society we live in is very masculine. It's very on. It's very, you always have to be turned on. You always have to be productive. You always have to be social and chatty and working a lot. Do you know what I mean? So there's very little time for rest in our society. We're used to just being on all the time. We want to be entertained. We want to be productive all the time. We don't want to rest at all. And that makes us more accustomed to the air and the fire. We want the air and the fire all the time, but we don't want to take the earth and water elements, even though, it's the earth and water which is the most nourishing, and which provides they're the heavier elements, and so they provide the foundation. So they're very important. They're just as important as the yang elements. It's all important. So anyway, what I'm saying is mid-May, there's going to be more of a focus on water than we've seen in a long time. This will be relatively short lasting because the moon will leave Cancer, and then I think Mars will leave Cancer. Mars doesn't stay in a sign more than 2-3 months or so. So it is brief, but I did want to mention that it will be, I think, something that we're not used to, something very challenging. But also, like I said, strange things can happen with the water element, because it does rule non-physical things. So intuitive things, mysterious things, very emotional times. And emotions can be extremely pleasant or extremely unpleasant. Emotions can make you miserable, and they can make you on top of the world. I think that's why, I guess it's just another way of saying how challenging those times are, but also how interesting and exciting and memorable they can be. So just keep that in mind with that water dominance. But there's also a dominance in air if we go forward, especially once the sun enters Gemini. So this is for May 22nd. At this time, the moon happens to be in Libra. Saturn is, of course, in Aquarius. And then now we've got that cluster with the sun, Mercury, and Venus in Gemini, along with the North Node. So there is a little bit of water dominance with Mars, Jupiter, and Neptune, but probably even more so with air. And that can be exciting. So, late May, we're entering Gemini season. Gemini is the third sign of spring. It's the final sign of spring. It's the sign leading up to the spring equinox. And so it's the last sign where there's more daylight than darkness in the northern hemisphere, and there's more daylight every day. So Gemini can be very exciting. There's so much energy available at that time because both Gemini and Cancer are the signs around the summer equinox. Summer solstice. And so there is just so much daylight available at that time. But especially in Gemini, where there's increasing daylight, it can be very exciting and very good for, getting out in the world and exploring. Life begins in Aries. Consciousness realizes itself in Aries. It strengthens itself and builds upon itself and, structures itself in Taurus. But then pretty soon that very structured identity longs to be unstructured again. It longs for expansion, I guess. It reaches out. And we can see this in human consciousness. So, a baby is born, baby cries a lot and screams. It's, it's learning to just deal with its basic needs. The hunger and the needing emotional comfort and the pooping and sleeping. That's pretty much, you're just figuring out your own basic needs at that time, and that's very indicative of Aries. Aries is realizing itself. It's all about the self identity and figuring out its needs and desires. And then from there we go to Taurus, which I don't know, maybe that starts when a kid is a toddler, but children can be seen as Taurus. So children can be seen as very like beautiful, I guess, or what's the word? Taurus is ruled by Venus, and so there's always a theme of beauty there. Children can be seen as like beautiful, I guess, or so like innocent or what have you. And they are, they're figuring out their needs in a more sustainable way and building that. They're growing a lot, so they're gaining physical mass at that time. What else? Also, you can see how like a baby will start to like put things in its mouth or just feel everything. And so that's sort of going from Aries into Taurus, where you're just just acclimating yourself or becoming familiar with your environment, I guess, and just learning about that type of stuff. So that's very indicative of Aries and Taurus. But then Taurus going into Gemini, that would be kind of like going from childhood into teenage years, where you become rebellious. You want something different, so you want to forget family, forget what you've built yourself upon so far. You want to get out there, so you don't want to hang out with your family. You want to hang out with like the neighborhood kids. Or that's what we did when I was a kid, when I was that age. You want to do like whatever your friends are doing. So teenagers are very aware of like fads or slang and lingo. These are all very Geminian things. Gemini is constantly manipulating words and like catching on with new social trends. It's very socially minded, and Gemini is all about, it's the third stage of consciousness where you're figuring out, okay, like I've realized myself pretty well. Like I get that I'm here and I'm alive and I understand my needs, but now I'm realizing, okay, other people are here too, and like they're conscious too, and they have their needs, and so like how do I express myself with them? Do you know what I mean? So Gemini is much about self-expression, but it's also about observing other people and being like, okay, other people are aware too. And we can see that again in the teenage years, where you're branching out, you're learning these social norms, stuff like that. So anyway, so that's a long way of saying that's kind of generally where the focus is late spring. It's a mutable sign, so the weather, you can see that. Like to me, I can always see how signs are mutable. The mutable signs just make sense if you look at the weather at that time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, so Gemini is technically within the season of spring, but it's already alluding to summer. So just depending on where you are, the weather will go back and forth. You'll get a little bit of spring weather, a little bit of summer weather, a little bit of spring, a little bit of summer, and that's very indicative of Gemini. So Gemini is, it's here and then it's there. It's here, then it's there. It's changing its mind. It's adapting. It's manipulating its surroundings, figuring things out. It's constantly changing, and that's the same with all the mutable signs. They are technically at the last third of each of their seasons, but they are alluding to the next season. They're going back and forth. They're changing. It's a time of change. But with Gemini, I think it's it probably is the easiest time of change, just because you're going from spring to summer. So you're going from a time of new growth to a time of solidifying that growth. And depending on where you are, summer can maybe be too overbearing, where it's too hot and too dry and it kills the life. But I would think in most places, summer's a positive time where, you have that abundance of light, and that's generally a good thing. I would argue that the sunshine is more good than it is bad, because of course too much of a good thing can be bad, but without it everything would just collapse. So okay, I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Let's go forward like a month. So Mercury does go retrograde in Gemini, and so that cluster sort of ends. I mean, and before the sun can enter Cancer, Mars enters Leo. And so, yeah, in Gemini, that cluster that we had through last half of Pisces, through Aries, through Taurus, and through most of Gemini, suddenly, totally dissolves. Mercury hangs back, Mars goes forward. Suddenly it's only Venus in Cancer. And then the sun will join her on June 20th or 21st. Something like that. I honestly don't think it matters. I mean, to me, I don't care about the exact date per se when we're going from one sign to another. It's just important to know June 20th and 21st is going to be a transition time from Gemini to Cancer. It's going to be the summer solstice, which is very important because, again, like I was saying, it's the time, this will be the time in the northern hemisphere of the most sunlight. So there's just so much light and energy available at that time. I think it's easy to take it for granted and to just kind of kick back and take it easy at that time. But at the same time, if you recognize the abundance of energy and use it to your advantage, you can go extra far with that. There's a reason why like Satanists or paganists do sacrifices or do various like ceremonies during the solstices and equinoxes. It's because there's more energy available at that time. You can do more things with energy at those times. And, some say that like portals open to other timelines, which makes sense to me because the solstices and the equinoxes are a time of change. Like astronomically, they're very significant because either, with equinoxes, the whole world has 12 hours a day, 12 hours of night, which has a lot of implications. It's very unifying. We're all kind of on the same page. It doesn't matter if you're at the North Pole, South Pole, or the equinox. Everyone has 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. That's very special. The solstices are more extreme, winter, and they're more polarizing, I guess. So, June 21st is the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. We have the most light, but in the southern hemisphere, they have the least light. It's the winter solstice. And that's very important as well, just having that extreme of light, whether it be the most light of the year or the least light of the year. Let's go forward though. Let's see what's some major stuff going on. I mean, right now, so we're on June 21st still, and these planets are very scattered now. They were so clustered before. We had so many planets in Aquarius, so many planets in Aries. Now by June they're very spread out. This is a much more well-rounded chart. If I was looking at this chart as a person, it would be very significant that the sun and the moon are both in water, so there'd be a water. I mean, in this chart specifically, there's definitely more of a water dominance than anything else. But if you just go forward a few days, then suddenly the moon will be in Sagittarius and then Capricorn. And then, overall, what I'm trying to say is the elements are relatively balanced, although I would say there's more of a water focus than anything else. And again, that's going to be very interesting. I don't want to repeat myself, but I am looking forward to that because as challenging as those watery times were, there is a part of me that misses that. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't know. There could be something exciting about that. I am very earthy and very airy, and I think those times are maybe the easiest for me to understand since that's what I am. But there's something more exciting about the water and fire times. Those are the more emotional times, the more dynamic times. Earth and air, to me, I guess air is dynamic, but earth and air are more logical, so they make sense more, which can definitely be refreshing. Although air does get a little bit complicated and crazy, I guess, at times. But there's just something exciting about water and fire. Like there's so much soulfulness, I guess, during the water and fire times because you're so much closer to the beginning or the ending of different chapters, and there's something intense and raw about that. It can be destructive, or there can be immense change, which is very difficult for us humans to, or I guess for anyone, any kind of creature to experience. I mean, too much change will kill you. You won't survive if it's too dramatic. Um, but again, there's something very exciting about being close to, like if you're close to death, that can be extremely traumatic. It can be destructive and depressing. It can also be extremely invigorating. And there's people that like jump out of planes or do the what's it called, the polar bear plunge, or where where you jump in the freezing water in January or what have you. There's people that do things to make themselves feel more alive by feeling like they're closer to death. And I think these are the types of themes which we experience in these very watery and very fiery times, because there's so much intensity there, I guess, compared to earth and air, which are more, earth and air are the middle two elements in most cycles. So they just aren't as raw, I don't think. They're more refined. They're more logical, more cerebral, which again is also cool. I'm not trying to say any one phase is more important or better than any other, but I think there's always a reason for everything. It's just been a while since we've had a really watery phase like we'll be experiencing in June this year, and I think that is something that I'm excited for. Even though I probably won't be excited once I actually get there, because I don't always do best with the water transits. But we'll see. I think it'll be exciting. I do love Mars and Leo, though, I have to say. It's just such a brave and admirable placement in individuals. And so I would imagine that it would be very nice to experience with the transit as well. Okay, let's go forward, though, and see, like, there's got to be some intensity coming up. Jupiter goes retrograde. So here, there's a lot of planets retrograde. When does that start? I mean, Pluto goes retrograde in this current month that I'm in April. And then I guess I haven't been paying attention. So May, Saturn will go retrograde. Yeah. Late April, Pluto will go retrograde, then Saturn. So, and we've had perhaps the good fortune, if you prefer times with less retrograde planets, where we've had no planets retrograde for most of 2021 so far. And so, of course, whenever you have a time of extremes, so like, let's say you have a time where you have a lot of fire planets, well, then, lo and behold, after that, there's going to be a time where you have no fire planets. There's going to be a period where if you had a lot of planets in one element, now there's going to be not a lot there later, which makes sense for karmic reasons that, I don't know, it just makes sense. But like, but the same with the retrograde planets. So we had a long phase of no retrograde planets. Now, guess what? We're going to have a phase later in the year of many retrograde planets. And that begins with Pluto's the first one in late April. And then if you go forward a month to May, now Saturn is retrograde. Let's go forward again to June. Now Jupiter and Neptune have gone retrograde as well. And, one by one, these are all going retrograde. So I'd speculate that Uranus will go retrograde next, maybe a month or two later. Yeah, so I'm correct. So August, it looks like August, Uranus will go retrograde as well. So by late August, early September. Oh, wow, and then Mercury goes retrograde as well in September. So by September, we'll have Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Chiron, Uranus, and Mercury all retrograde. I mean, so really, there's only... I mean, the Sun and Moon never go retrograde. And then plus Mars and Venus aren't retrograde, but all the other planets are retrograde. So that'll be very interesting. So things will be slowing down a bit in September. We'll be going back. All those retrograde names, so and all these RE words, rethinking, revisiting, replanning, reprogramming, revising, you're going back and redoing a lot of stuff or rethinking things. Mercury, the planets are going backward, and so therefore there's part of reality that seems to almost go backward as well. The themes that you're dealing with, because really astrology is all about like themes that you're working with. So with all these planets going retrograde, the themes that you're working with aren't going to be new themes. You're going over stuff that was already covered. It's like school or something, and you're having a class where it's like, okay, this Next month, we're actually just going to be studying stuff which we've already covered, just going over stuff to make sure that you really, really get it. You know, like, I'm just thinking of, now I'm going off on this tangent. I'm imagining this teacher getting some test results and being like, okay, these aren't great. We need to go back. Let's go back. Let's bring it all up. Let's just see everything we've covered over the last few months. That's what you'll get with all these retrograde planets. So there's no teacher per se, but life will be saying, okay, y'all haven't gotten everything so far. And you won't have gotten everything so far, and that's okay. It's to be expected when you have so many planets direct. So let's go back to April. With so many planets direct, especially as the direct planets enter their pre-shadow phase, the region which they will retrograde back through, but they're still direct. When the planets are in in the pre-shadow phases or areas, they're usually traveling very quickly, and relative to whatever planet they are, they're traveling relatively quickly. And so the themes represented by that planet are not being covered thoroughly. There's too much new stuff happening for us to thoroughly digest it, and so understandably there will be stuff that we're missing. For a lot of planets direct, maybe you'll be really busy and there's just stuff that going on that you haven't realized, and that's okay. So going forward to with all these planets direct in September, we'll realize, wow, this stuff was going on that I didn't even notice, or I did notice it, but I didn't see it in this way. All these retrograde planets they just shift your perspective. They bring to light matters which you didn't realize, but none of it is new. It might be new to you, a new way of thinking about it, or newly acknowledging it, but it's not actually new. It's stuff that's already been going on that you either didn't see or you weren't fully understanding. And again, that's totally okay. It's natural. These retrograde phases, again, going back to this Western, yang dominated masculine society, we don't like the phases where we go slow. We want the planets to be direct all the time and just go, go, go. But really, do we want that? I wouldn't want that. All these phases are necessary. Some are harder than others for us, but if you take advantage of them, that's what astrology is all about. It's not saying, oh crap, retrograde season is coming ahead, or if you want to call it that, and so it's just going to be terrible. No, it doesn't have to be terrible. It will be terrible if you go into it thinking that you can just go along business as usual, which unfortunately most people do, since they're not aware of astrology. But if you go along thinking, okay, I've got all these plans which I can just do just like I always do, and just go full speed ahead with being productive and everything, and doing more new stuff, yeah, then it will suck for you, because that's just not in line with what's going to be going on with the themes and the energies of that time period. If you go into it thinking, okay, I'm recognizing these planets are going to go retrograde, maybe, if it's me personally, I'll know that, of course, I try to digest everything digest everything as well as I can. I do my best in any given moment. I'm patient with myself. I'm not perfect. I do my best, and whatever it is, I'm okay with, as long as it was my best. But I understand that going into retrograde season, it's an opportunity to realize stuff that you haven't realized before. So if you want to learn, if you want to improve, then it's a great time. It can also be a good time just to rest, because it's not stuff that you're always super actively figuring out. You're not doing more new stuff to figure this stuff out. You're doing the opposite. You're just slowing down, maybe even going backwards. So something super typical for a really retrograde dominant period would be like taking time off work and going home to your parents' house, like a family get together or something, or just visiting your parents. You're going back to people from your past, because all of us, I would say, our parents are from our past in some way. That's our origins. So you're going back to your past, you're revisiting your roots and saying, okay, maybe it's refreshing you to where you came from, something about the past, which you had kind of forgotten or weren't prioritizing, which again is totally fine. Or people always say, their exes come to mind, but maybe there's some like unfinished baggage there. And I'm not suggesting that you should like get back together with your ex, but maybe you haven't, maybe something in your life that you've left behind, it wasn't totally resolved, and that was okay until all these planets went retrograde, and then you realize, like there's that little thing there that it's still there in my mind. I never fully got over that one thing, whether that's a good thing that you miss or a bad thing that you pushed aside and compartmentalized. During retrograde, things do get slower, and we do maybe think more and just process more, and we, these are the types of things we think about and deal with. Also, just want to mention September 27th. This seems like a detrimented. I'm not laughing. It's not. I don't mean to laugh. It just seems like a very detriment slash fall dominated chart. Sun is in fall in Libra. Mars is in detriment in Libra. Mercury is okay. It's neither in domicile nor detriment in Libra. It does okay. Libra's intellectual. Mercury likes that. Mercury likes weighing things, weighing pros and cons, assessing things, and Libra is all about that, so that works well. But at the same time, Mercury likes to be very linear and decisive, I guess. And in Libra, Mercury can kind of be indecisive or too focused on others and lose track of itself, I guess. Or, so it's, probably one of the better signs for Mercury, but it can be a little bit lost there. So, it's kind of neutral territory for Mercury. Venus, though, is in detriment in Scorpio. Saturn is in domicile. Pluto's neutral. Jupiter's neutral, I guess. Neptune's in domicile. And then Uranus is in fall in Taurus. So in total, we have 4 planets in detriment or fall. And this is especially significant because the personal planets are mostly in detriment or fall. So Sun, Mars, Venus, in particular, where the current focus, the current focus is on the inner planets. I guess I should say the current focus is represented by the inner planets. And so having those in such detrimented signs, we do experience this to some extent every fall. That's why it's called fall. The sun enters Libra, which thereby enters the season of fall, and the sun is in fall in Libra. So that's not a coincidence that we have these two definitions of the word fall, which are similar and both involve sun entering Libra. When a planet's in fall, it is a time of awkwardness and sometimes decay. The ancients said that the planets are exiled in their signs of fall. And so it's much like, so let's say, imagine you're the sun. So Aries is your vacation home. You love Aries. It's so easy. It's such a fun place to be. You're so strong there. It's like when you're on vacation, you feel it's maybe not your home. It's not your, it's not somewhere that's super comfortable and just a place to rest for you. That would be Leo for the sun. That's its home. It can chill there. It's very much itself there. It knows Leo like the back of its hand. It can just rest there. It's strong there, but in a calm way, I guess, or a normal way, a standard way. Home is like your default place to be, I guess. But for Aries, that's like the vacation home. And I'm getting this from Leo King, I believe. He would call it the vacation home. But it's such a great metaphor. Okay, so sun being in Aries, for example, since we're talking about the sun, that's the vacation home. It's very exciting. It's very strong there. It's not the default place, but it's especially exciting and especially strong. So now imagine, instead of being in your vacation home, you're in the opposite of that. You're as far away from there as you can possibly be. So you're like on the other side of the world. So you're in this place which you don't know very well. Same with this detrimented sign. So if the sun is in fall in Libra or in detriment in Aquarius, it's as far away from its domicile sign, so Leo, or its exalted sign, Aries. Or in other words, in this metaphor, in Libra and Aquarius, the sun is as far away from its home and its vacation home as it can possibly be. So it's in this weird land that it doesn't know very well. So imagine you're in this country you've never been to. You don't know the language. You don't know, excuse me, you don't know the laws. You don't know about this place. You're not used to it. It's not your norm. You're out of your element, I guess you could say. So when the sun is in detriment, we experience that through the sun's focus, or the seasonal focus. And I I did mention most of the bad sides, but people don't realize there's a lot of good that can come from the planets being in detriment. So, okay, so let's go back and say you're in this place that you don't know. I'm in this country. I don't know the language. I don't know the currency or the customs. I don't know the laws. Yeah, that can be bewildering and awkward. You might be awkward there. There's a certain awkwardness with the detrimented planets. And you might just feel like everything wrong is happening to you, which happens with the detrimented planets. But at the same time, it can open you up to a new way of thinking. You can be like, wow, this isn't normal. It feels weird, but I never knew this. It can be a great place for learning because you're like, okay, this is something different than I would normally experience. It's like, it's very counterculture. So same with like people who have a lot of planets in detriment, they might feel unlucky. They might feel awkward. But they will also be individual thinkers, like because they're not accepted by society so much, or they're not like normal, quote unquote. They think for themselves, and they might come up with unconventional ways of thinking. A lot of times, they could be geniuses just because they have a different approach than whatever is, whatever the status quo is, or whatever the whatever is commonly accepted. These are going to be more like fringe energies. And so all the stuff I just said, that's what we experience in fall. Everything's a little bit offbeat in fall. It's quirky, it's weird, it's different. Nature does appear to be dying, but there's something weirdly exciting about that. What else? We can be more passionate in fall. We can be more, some people say that like when the weather gets colder, people have sex more, or people are more affectionate. And that makes sense to me. I don't know exactly why that occurs. We're mammals, and so I know that like when it gets cold, part of why we are so affectionate and focused on physical touch is because it's a survival mechanism. Back in the day when it got cold out, you had to rely on each other's warmth and sleep together to survive. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's part of it. But I can also just understand that because when it does get cold, there is something kind of exciting about the cold in a way. Obviously not too extreme. Like I don't want to die out in the cold. But when it gets cold and there's that first frost of the year, there's something weirdly exciting about that. Is there not? I don't know. Plus it's fall, so that you're entering holiday season, and so you're always like looking forward to stuff. Which is sort of, it's interesting that we have our holidays during the most cold, barren time of the year, but I think that's for a reason. I heard that like one of the origins of Christmas in Rome, well, they took it from a pagan holiday, but they needed a holiday in that time of year because the soldiers needed something to look forward to or something. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but you get the point. Same with Thanksgiving. We have these holidays to bring happiness, I guess, to a otherwise bleak and cold time of year for many regions. So things are a little bit offbeat or weird in fall going into winter, but there's also a lot of value in that, in these detrimented planets. I guess that's what I'm supposed to be talking about. Okay, so yeah, let's get back to the chart. So September 27th, I'm so sorry, I keep just rambling, but yeah, so Uranus is in fall, but specifically I want to talk about Sun, Mars, and Venus again because they are the inner planets. They're where the focus is like currently at on a more short-term basis, and what we experience more distinctly if we're just focusing on the short term, which as humans we normally do. So Venus representing the pleasure, the finances, what our pleasures are sort of focused on, what we desire. That's in detriment. So we're desiring maybe weird things. We're finding money in weird places. Or Scorpio is a sign of shared resources. So, and again, it's because it's the middle of fall. So it's like it's getting colder. It's getting barren. It's getting harder to survive in a lot of places. The more seasonal it is, the more you'll experience this. So Scorpio is where you look around and go, okay, who can I trust here? If resources get scarce, how will they be distributed? Who can I trust to share my resources with? Who will, like Scorpio is always assessing its relationships, and it really wants strong relationships that it can count on. But yeah, so that's sort of why Scorpio is about shared resources, I guess. It's not about like It's not about like, wow, I have so much stuff, I'm going to share it with everyone. It's more about a lack, sharing because of impending harder times, I think. Scorpio's always in like a survival mode. Um, and so with Venus there, maybe there's not so much abundance. If Venus rules the abundance and it's the sign of Scorpio, which is more constricting, sorry. Yeah, maybe it would be financially harder just while Venus is in Scorpio. But maybe that could make you more resilient. There's always some kind of positive side to it. Maybe you could find a different way of making income that you hadn't thought about before, or something you desire, or something which makes your life more pleasurable that you just hadn't considered before or weren't fully taking advantage of. This type of energy can make you more resourceful. Same with the sun in Libra. People don't realize how, different, if we're just talking about sun sign astrology, different sun signs are much easier or harder to be than others. Libra and Aquarius would be the hardest sun signs to be because they feel out of place. They have that awkward, estranged energy that I was talking about with these detriment and fall positions of the sun. That's why Libra and Aquarius always feel kind of left out, or they don't know what their place is in society. That's that sort of detrimented energy. And that's what we experience at the beginning of fall. It is a beautiful time of year. Again, it is ruled by Venus. But I think especially with, in this case, Venus being in detriment at this time of year in Scorpio, maybe it won't be as beautiful. Maybe it will be colder early. I feel like sometimes I can notice that the weather does correspond with the planets in astrology, but I don't know how anecdotal it is. There might be some confirmation bias there. But if there is a correlation between the weather and astrology, I would think that it would be an early fall. It would be a colder fall. Just because the energy is very much on Libra with Sun, Mercury, and Mars all there, but Venus is the ruler of Libra and it's already in Scorpio, so it's a little bit ahead. It's farther along in the process where it gets colder. Where I grew up, I would always notice that the first frost would usually be in the Scorpio season, which I just thought was so fitting. So maybe that would be sooner for this year. I don't know. Okay, anyway, let's go forward. I don't even know what I'm doing with this video, honestly. So here, it gets kind of scattered again. I mean, Sun enters Scorpio. Mercury's retrograde, or it had just finished retrograding. Now it's direct, about halfway through Libra. Mars is at the end of Libra, preparing to enter Scorpio, where it will be in domicile. Honestly, there's not a lot of extreme stuff happening here. Jupiter has, gone retrograde and entered Aquarius again. In July. Sorry, I missed that. Let's go forward. So it looks like very late December or early January. Yeah, very late December. December 29th. Jupiter, or 28th or 29th. Don't shoot me if I get the date wrong. It's either December 28th or 29th, where Jupiter enters Pisces for the second and final time. Again, that's nice. Jupiter's in domicile. We yeah, it is nice to have planets in detriment where we can kind of learn different things, or, understand alternative ways of doing things or understanding things. But at the same time, it's always nice to have your benefics in domicile, those planets which bring abundance in the signs that they're most home and comfortable in. That's always nice. Can't complain there for sure. But what else do we have going on? So we do have a cluster in Capricorn. Yeah, so that begins. So at first, Pluto's in Capricorn, of course, and then Venus enters Capricorn. But then Venus turns retrograde, which is very rare. Venus spends less time retrograde than any other planet. Or I guess any other planet that goes retrograde. I guess you could say the sun and the moon have the least time just because they never go retrograde. But of the planets that go retrograde, Venus spends the least amount of time retrograde. So that is, rare. But because it goes retrograde there, it allows Mercury and the sun to catch up to it. And that's where you get this big cluster in Capricorn in late December. Especially once the moon enters Capricorn. Oh. Okay, so I guess by the time the moon catches up, Mercury will already be entering Aquarius. Yeah, so there's only like a few hours where both Mercury and the moon are in Capricorn at the same time, around January 1st. But during that small time frame, you do have 5 planets in Capricorn: Mercury, Pluto, Venus, Sun, and the moon. I think this will be a reflection of January 2020, which is where COVID was really beginning. I mean, they say the first case might have been like November or something, from what I understand. I don't know a lot about that, but to me, that big lineup in Capricorn in January 2020, to me, that was like the COVID, the astrological configuration, which represented COVID, really being birthed into the world in a very large way, if that makes sense. And so with this lineup in Capricorn happening January 1st, 2022, to me it seems like an echo of that. Interpret that how you will, but I think there'd be an echo of those themes that happened then. So maybe a resurgence of COVID, maybe a different strain or a different disease, or maybe even if there isn't a new resurgence of that sort of thing, maybe we're just experiencing economic impacts of stuff that happened back then, or some kind of impacts, some sort of theme that happened in January 2020. We're experiencing that again, or reviewing it January 2022, especially with the new moon. Whoops, I just hit I hate how there's a back button on the mouse. I never asked for that. Bear with me here. So I wanted to see the new moon, which I think would be January 2nd. Yes. So there's the new moon right there. By then, like I said, Mercury will enter Aquarius. It's just at 0 degrees Aquarius, just escaping this big cluster. Mercury's like, yep, this party was cool, but, Mercury just made its social appearance. Is that the word? I forget the word or the term. It made its appearance at the party, at the Capricorn party, and then it left a little bit early. But you've still got Pluto, Venus, and the Sun and the Moon with the new moon, all in Capricorn. So again, there's a big Capricorn lineup, and it's the most planets we've had in one sign since the Sun was in Gemini, I believe, or Taurus. Yeah, I think Taurus. So I guess now, right now, April of 2021. This is the last time there'll be that many planets in one sign, until there are 5 in Capricorn, January 1st, 2022. So that's interesting. Let's go forward like a month. Now I'm getting a little far ahead. You probably aren't interested in 2022. This is interesting though, isn't it? Okay, so we've got a 3-planet. There's actually a lot to unpack here. 3-planet conjunction at 27 degrees Capricorn. To me, that's extremely interesting. All 3 planets at the same degree at the same time. Very interesting, especially with Venus, Mars, and Pluto. A very dynamic bunch. So you've got Pluto, which is the slowest planet, at least that we're aware of at this time, representing like the generations and, very large, very expansive archetypes, like society and like generations. It's very long term. It's about human evolution, that sort of thing. That's combining with Venus and Mars, which are the feminine and masculine planets of desire and attraction. Whenever Venus and Mars conjoin, it's very sexual. It could be very flirtatious, but also very sexual. And we're very aware of our desires at the time. So, of course, very sexual, but also it does have a lot to do with like money. we're shallow creatures, or maybe not shallow, but we're instinctual. We do care about like sex and money, and also more of the finer things in life, or the more refined pleasures as well. But Venus and Mars together, it can be very sexual. And these planets do pertain a lot to our ambitions and our pleasures, our money. You know, Venus represents abundance, and so it does have to do with wealth. You know, and especially conjoining with Pluto, Pluto can challenge us, and it can be. It's almost Pluto's almost like if you mixed Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus together. Um, Pluto is challenging like Saturn, unpredictable like Uranus, yet covert and almost secretive like Neptune. You know, so it's an intense little guy out there. But you're combining that with Venus and Mars, so the pleasure. I would imagine. I mean, Venus and Mars can already be so deviant, you know, because there's too much desire there. Bill Clinton has Venus and Mars conjunct. There's other people as well, which I can't remember, but it's a recurring theme. If you have Venus Mars conjunct, you're so aware. Or Hitler, we just looked at, he had Venus Mars conjunct. Being so aware of your desires can be good because you at least know what you want. You can't get what you want if you don't know what you want, and that might sound silly to some people, but you know, some people's charts, you can tell they know exactly what they want. They know how they feel. It might be difficult, but they at least know where their stance is. They know where they're at, and they know where they're going. So that could be good. Like, some people don't know where they're going. They don't know what they want. So with Venus and Mars together, we at least know what we want. But on the other hand, if you are so focused, if you so feel so intensely what you desire and what you want, that can get you into trouble as well. If you, like, more conventional desires might not be enough for us when Venus and Mars are conjunct, especially when they're conjunct Pluto. We might desire crazy or wild things or really intense things or covert things. Especially in Capricorn. Capricorn's such a stoic sign. It's a really interesting place for that to happen. It does seem very financial to me, especially being in Capricorn. Like, Pluto can represent the economy itself. Venus can represent money. But especially being in Capricorn, which rules hierarchies and social rules, regulations, politics, economics. There could be a fluctuation in the economy. I would guess more on the downside than positive side, just because Capricorn's more restrictive. It's more about being conservative and cautious, and it's more about refining or eliminating things rather than gaining new things. It's not Sagittarius. It's not expansion. It's contraction. So there could be an economic contraction at the time. But I've only talked about this conjunction right here. You've also got Mercury and Saturn both conjunct at 19 degrees Aquarius. So that's interesting. It's not super crazy, but it's just interesting that it's happening at the same time as the triple conjunction. And it's especially interesting when you consider that a new moon happens at that time as well. So if you just go back a few hours, okay, maybe not that many hours. Okay, it's got to be this hour. This is just insane to me. So you got the triple conjunction at 27 degrees Capricorn. You've got a double conjunction at 19 degrees Aquarius. And you've got a new moon, which is a conjunction between the sun and the moon, in this case at 12 degrees Pisces. Really wild. Like, I mean, the odds of those three conjunctions happening at the same time are very minimal, especially the one in Capricorn with 3 planets all at the same degree at the same time. So what does that mean? So it's a new moon in Pisces. So the general setting would be, you know, really kickstarting Pisces season, because yes, each element, or each sign, you know, like when we say Pisces season, that begins when the sun enters Pisces, but it really, really begins when the new moon happens in that sign. You get that extra oomph of whatever energy that is. So that's happening, that's happening at the new moon in Pisces. And that in itself looks really great to me. Just in Pisces. The moon, I think, is very comfortable in Pisces. Pisces is so emotional, and it's water. And it's a nice place for the moon. So that means, you know, especially the new moon is a time of humble beginnings, and that all just seems so fitting to me in Pisces. So it's a time of relative peace, I would say. It's calm, it's comforting. Again, like I said, it's a time of humble beginnings. It's a time of increased intuition and creativity. But especially when you add Jupiter and Neptune there, which are both in domicile in Pisces, you know, everything I said times 10. So very harmonious, very creative, very peaceful. but there's also abundance there. And with the 4 planets in Pisces, there's that really strong emphasis in Pisces. So Pisces can be a time of loss. It's a time of endings, but it can also be a time of expansion. I mean, Pisces both expands and contracts at the same time. Um, it's almost like as you're falling asleep, you become more and less aware of the room at the same time. You're going into yourself and like melting and fading away, but at the same time, you're kind of fading around out into the room, into everything else. Does that make sense at all, or am I just crazy? Or like, what's another way of saying that? Like Pisces people, they can be very selfish. They can be very self-contained, especially in their escapism. They can be selfish just by their absence. But at the same time, they can be also very giving. They can feel everything around them so intensely. They can feel like they're a part of their surroundings. It's almost like they don't have a physical body. Like the fish, which is the symbolic animal of Pisces, it doesn't have a hard body. It's slippery. It's soft on the inside and soft on the outside. It's not like Scorpio or Cancer, Scorpion and a crab, which have their hard shell to protect their soft interior. Pisces is soft on the inside and the outside. So there's no like the barrier separating themselves from the outside world is permeable. Does that make sense? So everything is folding in and outward at the same time. You have Jupiter there, which was expansion. So Pisces is a time of expansion, but not physically. It's a time of expanding your mind or your soul or your heart, I guess you could say. It's the time right before the end. So, like Pisces would represent old people before they die. They're very candid. They're very real. Because you don't have much time left. It's very raw. People are more sincere with elements, phases like that. So hopefully, I guess I'm just kind of rambling about Pisces, but hopefully that gives you an idea or an understanding. But you're combining all that with all the stuff I just said about Venus, Mars, and Pluto and Capricorn, all that desire. And Venus is so emotional, it's so passionate. It can be very aware of its desires as well, so that does strengthen that. None of these conjunctions, these 3 conjunctions, which all happen at the same time on March 2nd, 2022, none of them aspect one another. They're happening at completely different degrees of each of their signs. But just the fact that they all happen simultaneously is very powerful. And I will say the new moon at 12 degrees does make a sextile with Uranus at 11 degrees Taurus. So what does that mean? To me, it means a time of beginnings. Conjunctions are always about beginnings. It's about a new cycle. We experience that very literally with the new moon, but it's true for any other planet as well. So Mercury has just completed 1 lap around the zodiac relative to Saturn, and therefore we're experiencing a new Mercury-Saturn cycle, if you want to think about it that way. Venus and Mars have both completed 1 lap around the zodiac relative to Pluto. You could even say Venus has completed 1 lap relative to Mars. And again, more literally or more readily understood by us is the cycle seen by the moon. The moon has completed 1 lap around the zodiac relative to the sun. And both the sun and the moon are about to conjoin Jupiter. Let's go forward to that. I know I'm dwelling a lot on this time frame, but these configurations seem really interesting to me. I mean, yeah, so especially here, if you just go to March 2nd, I mean, sun at 12 degrees Pisces, moon at 13 degrees Pisces, Jupiter at 14 degrees Pisces. So they're all pretty much conjunct, not exactly, but, I think it's very powerful having, of course, Neptune's been in Pisces since before I got into astrology, since, before I can remember. But Neptune's the ruler of Pisces, and so it strengthens any kind of configuration happening in that sign. But the same is true for Jupiter as well. So Jupiter's in domicile there as well, maybe even more so since it's the traditional ruler of Pisces. So having that conjunct the new moon with an orb of 2 degrees or so is very powerful. So that it just multiplies those Piscean themes, like I said, Pisces is a time of expansion, but it's a time for emotional, soulful, intuitive expansion. And Jupiter, that's all about. Sorry, Jupiter is all about that. So Jupiter is about expansion physically into the world, through abundance. That's more to the side of Sagittarius. going out physically, doing physical experiences. Sagittarius is a very physical sign. It likes to go out and try physical experiences. Um, it's athletic. It's about gaming and stuff like that, sports. It likes physically traveling the world. Pisces is often much about that. Is often is much about traveling the world, or um, or I guess the point I'm trying to make, though, is that Pisces doesn't have to physically do these things. Pisces can travel the universe without actually leaving its room. Like, that would actually be very typical of Pisces. Um, intuitively connecting to the universe, intuitively connecting to somewhere very far away without physically being there. So you could do that in many different ways. You could do that, um, through spiritual ways, or like metaphysics or what have you, meditation, but also just more ordinary things like learning about a different place, or learning a religion of a place that's far away. Um, that sort of thing. You can experience things almost vicariously, or just delve into yourself and experience different themes that way, if that makes sense. So that's kind of complicated, but Pisces is all about expansion, but it's not always in the most tangible way. It can be expansion of the mind, or expansion of the soul. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to end this now because it is March 2022, and I've covered all the way to March 2022, and at this current time it's only April 2021. I will say, though, that it's going to get more interesting, which will be cool, I guess, but at the same time, like the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. If you do have, or if and when you do have slow periods, whatever that may be for you, appreciate those. That's what I've heard, and that's what I've come to understand, is that you need to appreciate those boring times, because in this lifetime that we're all living in, we're all existing at, about the same time period, unless you're listening to this hundreds of years in the future, which seems unlikely to me, but whatever. But anyway, my point is, we're all experiencing this timeline, this moment in time, and at this time, those boring periods are very rare. Most time periods in general, there wasn't so much going on, which, like, yeah, it might have been boring, but it was also probably more peaceful. So just appreciate those slower times where you can rest, because they won't last. It will get more interesting, more chaotic. The astrology of the 2020s gets very interesting later on. I'll link my video called The Astrology of the 2020s, in case you're interested in a more broad overview like this, where but in that video I go through the entire decade, and it does get very interesting. So around the mid 2020s and 2025, the planets switch from yin to yang in a very overt way, in a very strong way. And so things do get very expansive going into the late 2020s. But even 2023 and 2024, we're going to experience a major shift. I was just saying today, we're about to shift from Generation Z to Generation A. And that is something that we can see in the people born of those generations. But it's also something that you can experience living through those time periods. And there's about to be that shift in the early to mid 2020s. So definitely stay tuned. It's going to get very interesting. So that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Let me know, as always, if there's anything you'd like me to cover. I know I haven't been consistent. I can't put out videos every week. I'm not consistently interested in what's going on in the astrology every week. It's just, I can't commit to a routine. It can't be too ordinary. I have to be interested in whatever it is, and my mind is constantly going to different places. So I'm still finding my groove here with this channel and figuring out the best way to bring you content. But that's why I always ask, what's important to you? What are you curious about? Just so I can get some direction in what type of content to produce. At any rate, thank you for watching. Yep. I'll see you later. Bye.